Hi everyone, welcome to Fleecimals Friday. I'm Michelle from Fleecimals, here to teach you some life skills with sewing and crafting. Today I'll be making these little foam shelves that are perfect for displaying little stuffed animals or just little trinkets on your wall that you're very proud of. So today we're going to be using some 1/2-inch foam core. I'll be using 1/2-inch insulation, and I'll explain why in a bit, as well as some scrapbooking paper. So for this project, you're gonna need 2 pieces of scrapbooking paper, your foam board, an X-Acto knife with a very sharp blade. You're gonna want a brand new one, a hot glue gun, scissors, pencil, normal craft supplies that you may have around your house, and then a ruler or 2. The 2 rulers I will mainly be using is a clear acrylic ruler, as well as a metal ruler with a cork back. And these are really great for non-slips. So, to get started, we're actually going to use graph paper as well. You can just use your mat if you do have one, but I want to open this up to people who don't have these kind of things. So, I'm going to grab a piece of graph paper, and we're going to draw out the template that we're going to be using today. So, to make this shelf, it is 5 inches by 5 inches with a little platform on the bottom for stability. So, we're going to hold out our graph paper, and we're going to mark 5 inches by 5 inches. And then for our shelf, we're going to do 3 by 3. And then you want 2 inches here to here. So you've got 2 inches, 3 inches, 3 inches. Then we're going to connect this line. That's when it's going to give the angled shape. So we're going to hold our ruler, grab it, and we're going to make the template. So you can sit and draw in all of the lines, or you can just go straight to cutting them out. The reason I'm preferring to use this cork back ruler for this sheet of paper is because with the acrylic ruler, it can get a little slippery on this surface. So for this paper, since it's such a thin paper, I'm going to be cutting it with this ruler. The kinds of crafts that I'll be teaching, I don't want you to have to find a template, download a template, print a template. I want it to be, especially for this craft, something that you can make on your own. So we've got our template for our shelf, and now we're going to cut out our standee. Okay. Having a trash can handy is also very helpful for these. So, now that we have our 2 patterns, you're going to want to pick up some 1/2-inch foam board. I'm using 1/2-inch foam insulation, but you can actually just get foam core at Michael's. You just want to make sure it is the 1/2-inch thick. The reason I'm using insulation is just because I have it. It's also a lot cheaper. So for a 3 by 2 foot sheet of foam core at Michael's, it could be about $5. For an 8 foot by 4 foot sheet of foam insulation at Home Depot, it's going to be about $5. So I just happen to have this. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our templates and tape it directly onto our board. Just using some clear tape, I'm just going to tape all 4 corners, keeping it as flat and even as possible. We don't want any warping Okay, now you see I have a little bit of a warp, so I'm just going to fix that. It only happened with this last tape, so I'm going to gently cut away just the tape. You can leave the rest on there. It's not going to affect it. Peel it off and retape. Flatten it out. There we go. All right, so we're going to simply cut around our templates that we've made. Now, for this project, you want to make sure that you have a very sharp blade, so that way it cuts through the foam board in one pass. If you do multiple passes, it'll end up a little bit more jaggedy, and we really want a clean edge for gluing this project. So I recommend getting a a brand new blade, and when you're aligning it with your ruler, start away from the foam and try to make it as straight as possible. Even I have trouble with this, and I've been cutting this board a million times. So we're gonna line it up with our pattern, make our blade as straight as possible. Go all the way through, and I'm just gonna go all the way down so we have less on the desk. And you're just gonna follow all of the pattern that we've taped down. That's one piece, and now we will cut out the next. This is also a great project if you have leftover foam core, because altogether you really only need 5 inches by 8 inches for a total size. You can butt these right up against each other. I already used this for a different project, so it's already got hot glue on it. Just cut away those parts and you can use it, no problem. All right. Now, just like my dad, Dr. V, teaches in cooking, it's good to clean up as you go. All right, so with what we've cut, the beauty of cutting it this way and taping it is that the pattern just pulls right off. So you can keep these, reuse them. I'm going to place them to the side. So now we're going to want to get out our scrapbooking paper. I got this very cute scale pattern that's watercolor. I just picked these up. They're 55 cents a sheet, depending on the quality of the paper. The thinner ones are going to work better for this project. If you get a heavier weight paper, I've done it, but it is a little bit more difficult, especially with scoring around those edges. So I recommend picking up 2 because an extra 55 cents is worth the relief if you do mess something up. But you should be able to complete this whole project in 1 sheet if you cut it correctly. I've messed it up before, and let me tell you, it's a lot nicer having an extra sheet to rely on just in case. All right, so I'm going to take 1 sheet and we're going to just trim off the sails part of it because we don't need it. Actually, this one looks like it has a perforation, but I'm still going to cut it off because if you perf that, it's going to leave a little bit of a jaggedy edge. Okay. So with this pattern, with this paper, there is a pattern. There is a up and down pattern. So when you're making a shelf, you're going to want to make sure you keep that in mind. If you're doing a solid color or a scattered pattern where there's not a specific up down, then it's a little easier. But I'm going to be showing you with a pattern, so that way I'm showing you the harder one and therefore the easier you should be able to follow this pattern no problem. So the first thing we're going to do is I want my shelf to have this direction going along the shelf this way, vertically. So what I'm going to first do is turn it to the bottom side, and I'm going to cut 2 1/2-inch strips. So because my acrylic ruler has a nice 1/2-inch gap, I'm going to just line it up and cut 2 1/2-inch strips. We're going to set those aside. This is for wrapping the edges of the shelf, so we do want to make sure we keep those. Now, for the main part of the shelf, we need 5 inches by 11 inches. And the beauty of scrapbooking paper is it's always 12 inches by 12 inches. So since we already cut off 2 1/2-inch strips, that means that it's already at 11 inches, so we just have to cut a 5-inch strip. So we're going to align it, cut 5 inches. Okay. So we're going to set this piece aside so that way we can work on the main shelf, and then we'll come back with this little support. So we're going to pull over our pieces and have our shelf. Now, like I said earlier, it is very hard to get that straight cut when it comes to this foam. So I'm going to look for whichever is going to be the straightest edge to be my front edge. So this edge is my straightest. So also going to remove this little liner piece. I'm going to make sure I have it flipped so it's up and down. We're going to align it to the middle of the sheet and drop it. We want about 1/4 of an inch on the bottom because we're going to be doing 5 inches, gluing a 1/2 inch, and then gluing another 5 inches. So with that 11 inches, you'll then have an extra 1/2 inch to tuck behind. So you can put some pencil marks in just so you kind of have a guide of where you're gluing next. So with my hot glue gun ready, I'm going to glue a square, roll away pencil, and we're going to take it with the flattest edge and press down, again leaving about 1/4 of an inch on the bottom. Every paper is going to react differently to hot glue, and so is your foam. So you do have to keep in mind that with your foam, it can melt. It's plastic, so do be careful with that. Next, we're going to be wrapping this edge, the front edge. Now, you're going to want to use the table to lift your foam and apply pressure. That way it's as flat and straight as you can make it. If you pick it up and try to do it by hand, you might not get as straight of an edge as the table would. And now we're going to flip over and do the next. And adhere. And add some pressure. Okay, so now that we've wrapped our shelf, we're going to fold in these back edges and glue those down as well. Now, these are very small edges and can burn your fingers, so it's good to fold them down first, apply your glue, and then press down onto your table. If you get some hot glue on this type of mat, it's not going to hurt it too bad unless you're consistently melting glue directly on it. That isn't good for any surface. So we're going to carefully put a thin strip of hot glue and adhere down. Now, if you don't have a cutting table like this, a granite countertop will work just fine. Granite will absorb the heat of the hot glue and cool it immediately. If you only have a wooden table, my advice is to put down a sheet, either of thick cardstock, or if you have removable vinyl, that would work to protect against paint and other things like that. I'm not sure about it protecting against hot glue, but definitely a kitchen counter would work very well over having a kitchen table that's wood. So now that we have this, we're going to grab one of our strips from earlier, and we are going to adhere it to the edge. Now, keep in mind that this is my front edge and my scales are going down, so I want to do the exact same thing with my strip of paper. Now, this kind of shelf, since we're wrapping the front and the back at the same time, the patterns aren't going to line up on the sides, but I have done it where it does line up on the sides, and I've found that it looks nicer to have the front line up with the top and the bottom, have it as easy as possible for one wrap, and then add the sides instead of focusing on the sides, because you are going to see that front side the most. So we're going to put some glue directly on the foam, which is scary, so be fast with that, or you can do it on the paper, but I find it easier to do it on the foam. And you're going to apply your paper, put it on the table for cooling, and I overhung that just a little bit, and that's where we're going to trim. So I'm just going to grab my scissors, and you can trim away the excess. Okay. So now we're going to do the other side. Same exact thing. Grab our hot glue. And adhere. If you're lucky enough to have a hot glue gun with a hot and cold setting, you may end up switching it back and forth just to make sure it's not too hot or too cold. Trim away just like before. All right, and the main part of our shelf is complete. So we can set that aside and now work on this piece. Now, with this piece, if you were to align this side like this and wrap this way, you're going to end up with one side way more angled than the other. So we actually want to align this edge, the front edge, to the straight of the paper. So we have our pattern going up and down again. We have our shelf angled like this, and we're going to place it like that. Put some hot glue directly on the foam and place it in the center of your paper with about 1.5 inches at the bottom, plenty of room at the top. And now we're going to kind of wrap it like a present. So we're going to fold each side and glue that down. It's almost like making an ice cream sandwich. It almost feels the same thickness as well. If you have excess glue, that's no problem. You can use your finger. You can get silicone caps for your finger. Just be careful. And then we're going to repeat with the other side. So I'm going to put glue here and fold down. Just like that. All right, so now we have a little sandwich with our shelf base, And about 1 inch away from that top, we're just going to trim off the paper. We don't actually need that. So we are going to be folding one side down. So a good technique is to first cut all the way around about a little bit more than a 1/2 inch all the way around, just so you can have enough paper, because one of these sides is actually going to wrap and become the bottom. So one of them is going to tuck in, same with this edge back here, and then this last one is going to finish it. So we want to make sure we have enough of this. So we're going to angle our scissors cut so that the flap that is going into the thinner part is angled in, so we get a larger excess on here. So this is the side I'm going to fold over. Then we can do the same thing with this other side. We can trim that. And this side is now going to be tucked in. So I only really want about 1/4 inch, half of what's going to be covering the shelf. And the first thing I'm going to do is fold in this smaller flap, and I'm going to trim that a little bit as well. So fold that in. And then I want to measure about how much it's going to be. So I'm gonna mimic folding it in, lay it on the table as if I'm gluing it. Grab my pencil and mark. So I want to make sure I at least have that excess in order to finish this edge. For the other 2 edges, this side is going to be touching the shelf, and this side is going to be touching the wall. So it doesn't need to be as clean as the bottom, because the bottom you will see if it's hung above you. So we're going to trim away the corners. And we're also going to trim away this top piece. So we really only need about 1/4 inch all the way around this top piece. And you can clean this up as well. It is a little difficult to get a very clean edge the first cut around because you have so much excess, which is a good thing. We want to make sure we have enough to do the project. So now with this, we're going to trim all the way around, or down this next side, not the bottom, but the back side. Do the same thing, add about 1/4 inch of trim all the way around. Now I don't want to cut too far deep into there, so I'm going to kind of angle this and cut there. The next thing we want to do is trim the corners, because we don't want this extra piece hanging out. So you want to base it off of the angle of the shelf. So I want to cut here and here, match that angle, or do it a little bit more so that way it doesn't have excess hanging out. This is a technique that you also use in sewing when you sew something inside out and flip it. And then we want to trim here as well. And I'm going to take a little bit out of these corners just for a flatter glue. Now the last piece that we have to cut is this bottom edge, as well as this corner. So let me cut this corner first. We do have to cut this bottom edge, so we're going to cut it along that line that we made. Watch where we're wrapping, and then cut again right here. And now we're going to hot glue each of the flaps in and end with this last piece. So we're going to start with this small piece at the top. And then these two. And for this, you don't need a ton of glue, just a very thin line. And then to the back. and then the bottom. We're going to tuck in our tuck flap first. Hot glue in this one. Then we're gonna glue the bottom, and then it folds up to the top. I do see a little excess that I do want to trim. I'm going to trim that out now before I glue, just to make it a little easier. I also want that to be nice and flat. We're going to glue that. And this little piece too. And I'm going to just trim this extra little piece that is hanging off from the bottom. All right, so this piece is now done. Clean up a little bit. And now we get to do the fun part, which is assemble our two pieces. So I'm going to find my front edge again, figure out what's my top, what's my bottom. And then I'm going to take my support piece. I'm going to hold it as if I was hanging it on the wall. And then I'm going to flip it so that way I can glue it. So all we need to do is add a little line right down the middle of hot glue. Make sure the back of each of the pieces is flush, so one isn't sticking out more than the other. And when that's cool, that's your shelf. So you can hang these to the wall with just a couple of command strips, and then they don't damage your wall. They don't hold a lot of weight. These are really for displaying very light items, maybe a couple of stuffed animals like I have, or a little drawing, something that you want to share. But I wouldn't put anything heavy or glass or fragile on top of these shelves. These are more for just fun decorations. But now you can make little shelves in any design pattern you'd like, any pattern that you can find. And you can also adjust these. You could probably put two next to each other in the same pattern and have a wider shelf. You can have a lot of fun with these. So I hope you enjoyed this Fleecimals Friday video, and I'll see you next time. Bye!